So hey, now we're going to bring on JD Enright. JD is our title sponsor of TMG Core. You guys have been hugely supportive of our work, and we appreciate you greatly. Great to have JD there with the backdrop of all the liquid-cooled supercomputers, high-performance computers that they produce that are vital to the needs of the private sector, but also to the national security and defense industry and our defense. So how are you doing now, JD?
Doing fantastic. What a wonderful day thus far. I know it's only 1:30 here Central Time in beautiful Plano, Texas, but it's been a really full morning with some fantastic people that you've had here on American Future Series. So, honored to be participating in it. Yes, our technologies are really focused on dual use. They're dual use technologies, both on the commercial sector and high performance computing, but also how we support our troops and national security in general in the Department of Defense. So as you can see right here, I'm located in our manufacturing headquarters here in Plano, Texas, where we manufacture what we call auto and edge box, which are high performance computing nodes, as it were, using two-phase immersion cooling. All the boys and girls in the back here working hard to support those dual use applications. So wonderful to be part of this.
I'm glad you're here. So now you're going to get to introduce Congressman Sessions and have a little talk with Secretary Gates. That's what we're going to bring up next. So if we've got Congressman Sessions with us, let's go ahead and bring him up and have you guys visit a second.
Fantastic.
Hello, Pete. You're on mute, sir, I think. It's good to see you. Good to see that flag.
I think we're better now.
We are better now. It's good to have you, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Anyway, I'd like you to visit with JD, our good friend, and I'm going to let you guys take it away.
Congressman, how are you today?
I'm great, JD, and it's exciting to hear about not just the high tech that you bring to bear, but what it'll be used to protect this great nation and our men and women who serve so admirably and take their time out of their lives to keep America strong. Thank you.
Well,
thank you, Congressman. I see you're wearing a very interesting flag there. I love that flag. We are right here, greatest state in the nation, right here in Texas.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Well, you're a man that needs little introduction, but I'm going to give you a little introduction anyways. So for those of you who are joining us here on American Future Series, we're joined here by Congressman Pete Sessions, is a U.S. representative for the Texas 17th Congressional District and has represented the state of Texas in Congress for the last 2 decades. That's right, 2 decades. What an accomplishment and a great service to this country. He's been working a long time and have been a long time advisor and support of the American Future Series. So welcome Congressman Pete Sessions. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you very much, and it's a delight to join you this afternoon. I'm pleased to tell our attendees that we have a man who I consider to be a preeminent, not just patriot for the United States of America, but a leading edge philosopher and thinker. I grew up and went to Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, and studied history and government and had a foundation that propelled me and has propelled me my whole life. That along with background from my father. But Hans Morgenthau is a writer of philosophy and of government and spoke clearly about how America and the world needed to work together to form not just teams, but really to work in everybody's advantage for civilization. That has been my philosophy of what I've attempted to do throughout my career and my life. Secretary Gates, likewise, is a man who has devoted himself not just to public service, but to excellence in education, excellence in every area that he has served this great nation. And I'm delighted to add in today our Secretary Gates to begin a conversation, a fireside chat, so to speak, as if there would be one on Zoom. But Secretary Gates has agreed to join us today. Secretary, thank you for joining us today.
Congressman, it's a pleasure to be with you. Pete, nice to see you again.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, we just before we have come on, we saw the families of the men and women who you have directed, you have been a part of, that I have made policy decisions about, and they have served this great nation admirably. And we owe them a debt of gratitude. We also owe a debt of gratitude to our free enterprise system, just like we see here that JD and others are a part of in Plano, Texas. Our men and women who serve our military in uniform and also in our intelligence branches need effective leadership like you offer. And I believe, Sir Secretary, you offer advice, not just over the horizon, but advice about how to effectively plan, execute, and protect this great nation. And I ask you to be on here today to really kind of walk around the globe as you might wish. Obviously, I would like to hear about some things that are important, China and Taiwan, Afghanistan, but I would appreciate, and our audience would too, Secretary, if you would take time and have a dialogue, a chat with us about the things that you think and see and enter into our mind, because we're open to hearing from your advice about how we should look at where we are today in our world. Mr. Secretary?
Pete, thanks very much for those kind words. And just going back to the previous segment, I would just say that, my generation's war was Vietnam, and it was a disgrace how this country treated our returning veterans after that war. I'm happy to say that subsequent to Iraq and Afghanistan, that the change in this country and the way we treat our veterans and the way we look at our veterans is 180 degrees different than it was then. And the number of foundations that have reached out to help wounded warriors, the welcome that universities may have for our veterans all over the country. Every university now has programs welcoming veterans and welcoming them on campus. The kind of ugliness we saw in the late 70s on campus toward our veterans is no longer there. This generation of young students is welcoming them to their campuses. Businesses are reaching out, hiring hundreds of thousands of veterans and good jobs. So the welcome that and the treatment of our veterans is so different and so much better thanks to foundations such as was just being described, and frankly just a different attitude here in the country, and it's very heartwarming. And I would just like to make that little pitch before talking about the rest of the world, because the rest of what I have to say is probably more depressing than that. I would say, just to lead off the conversation, I think that the world has not been so unpredictable and in many ways so dangerous since the late 1940s. We have rising dangers, significant dangers, both in Russia and in China. We also face regional dangers in North Korea and Iran. We face global dangers through cyber, which I think is the most dangerous weapon of all, because it can be used politically, as we have seen. It can be used economically to shut things down. It can be used militarily. And so it's the most versatile weapon that exists. And it often can be non-attributable. So it's very difficult to figure out who launched the attack. So we face a very challenging environment internationally. I think the biggest single overseas threat is, and terrorism is still a big problem, and I think likely to resurge after the collapse in Afghanistan. But I think the biggest single danger that we face going forward, and certainly the biggest challenge, is China.
Okay, so that's China, and we've identified now someone that is actually a nation state, someone who presumptively has the ability and the desire. What is their desire, Secretary?
I think China's aspirations are global. I think that they intend to be to become the preeminent country in the world. I think they intend to be that in every dimension, militarily, politically, and economically. I think that they see themselves as the rising power, the U.S. as a declining power. They have invested huge sums of money in new weapon systems and new technologies. I think that they're ahead of us in some areas. We're striving to catch up in areas like hypersonics and so on. But I think that they're a formidable competitor. I think that if we are able to avoid a military confrontation with China, which is most likely to come over Taiwan if it comes at all, then that competition will be in every realm of power. And here's where we are at a serious disadvantage, because we have dismantled all of the non-military instruments of power that were so critical in our victory in the Cold War. So the United States Information Agency was abolished in 1998. We have no strategic communications capability. The Chinese, under Hu Jintao, in the early 2000s, invested $7 billion to build a strategic communications capability. They have radio and television networks all over the world. They're present in this country. They've built hundreds of these Confucius Institutes all over the world. They're basically funded and staffed by the Chinese government. We have such institutes on probably 80 or 90 U.S. university campuses. And they have reached out around the world to create these networks. One of the challenges the Australians have faced is every Chinese language newspaper in Australia is owned now by the Chinese government. And so we're facing this strategic communications challenge in our getting our message to the rest of the world and countering the Chinese message. In the realm of economics, not only are they a huge economic power, their Belt and Road project has given them entree to scores of countries around the world. The Chinese now either own or manage 35 major ports all over the world. And then they have this $1 trillion Belt and Road program that has extended even to South America and to Western Europe. And this gives them opportunities, again, for more influence, more power, more access, and frankly, the opportunity to bribe a lot of officials and get them on side for the Chinese. They have an ideological message, and that is that the Chinese way, this authoritarian approach to state-run capitalism, is better than our capitalist method and our free markets, and they're showing up their success as opposed to the challenges we've had, particularly our economic crisis in 2007, 2008. So in all of these and other dimensions of power that are going to be the field of competition with China, we're well behind and really don't even have a plan for how we catch up or recreate those capabilities that were so important during the Cold War.
Interesting. So they by and large could decide they want to challenge us militarily. We know they're challenging us technologically. We know that they are literally in our backyard, intellectually, in terms of in our capitalism. How should we look at a relationship? Do we try and craft one where we have détente, so to speak, between us and we cool that? Or do we simply understand what it is and make great decisions moving forward?
Well, I think our foremost objective would be to keep this competition in the non-military sphere, so to avoid a military confrontation. A major war with China would be a catastrophe, just as a major war with the Soviet Union would have been. But the best way you avoid a war is to prepare for one, is to have a strong military, and for there to be no doubt about your willingness to use it if our vital interests are at risk. And so I think we've started down this way, this approach in terms of rebuilding our military, modernizing our military, but we've got a long way to go. The Chinese don't, in absolute dollars, don't spend as much as we do, but people don't realize our personnel costs eat up a third of our military budget. So in terms of the money available to actually invest in weapon systems and capabilities, the Chinese are probably very much on a par with us. And frankly, they are much more agile and they can move much more quickly. They don't have to put up with continuing resolutions that don't allow any new starts for programs or things like that. You know, the current administration would like to have an arrangement, an approach to China that includes cooperation where we can, competition such as economic, where it's necessary, and then confrontation where we have to. The problem is that as much as they want to keep this relationship in sort of three separate buckets, Xi Jinping doesn't buy that. And he basically says, if you want my help on the climate, you got to do something in the South China Sea. You got to back off in the South China Sea. You got to back off away from Taiwan. So everything is linked as far as Xi Jinping is concerned. So he's basically not buying into the kind of strategy that the administration would like to see happen, and frankly, that I think would make sense from our standpoint. But the problem is, if you have a strategy that it takes two to tango, and if the other side doesn't want to play that way, then you've got to have a plan B on how you're going to compete in a different realm than you want to.
Secretary, I want to move to outer space, Space Command, our brand new branch of the military, and I'll be with our commanding general next week. What do we need to understand about space, about competition, about threat?
Well, I think here again, I think that we are most interested in exploring space for peaceful purposes. I think both the Chinese and the Russians see it as another element of their competition with us, and want to be in a position to put our satellites at risk, whether it's from a ground-based attack or whether it's from other satellites attacking our satellites. So I think we have to have both as in so many other arenas, we have to have both a defensive and an offensive strategy. We are going to have to communicate to them, first of all, that our preference would be to negotiate non-weaponization of space, so that it's safe for everybody to explore peacefully. But if they don't want to go along with that, if they don't want to negotiate those kinds of limits, then we have to have the capability not only to defend our satellites, which are critical not only to our economy, but to our military communications, to the guidance systems of our weapons programs, and so on. So we have to be able to defend ourselves, and also, if necessary, be able to take them out, take out their satellites if we should have a military confrontation. Preferred outcome is a negotiation where none of us do those things. But if they are not interested in a negotiation, then we have to protect ourselves.
Mr. Secretary, we spent blood, treasure, time, anguish over Afghanistan. We could agree or disagree about what the right thing to do is, but we have an understanding that the Taliban now has control of that country. Is there a tipping point that all of a sudden we become engaged again, or do we just watch? What's our viewpoint of Afghanistan and the United States and the Middle East, sir?
Well, I think for the time being, there's very little interest in getting engaged except as necessary in counterterrorism actions. You had both a Republican president, President Trump, and a Democratic president, President Biden, both say it was time to come out of Afghanistan. So that's a presidential decision by presidents of both parties. And so reflecting the will of the American people, that was the decision, that we were going to come out of there and come out all together. But the moment that President Trump signed the deal with the Taliban in February of 2020, our government, and I would say especially our Defense Department, at that point should have begun making contact with the Afghans who had helped us, getting their contact information, getting their locations, giving them directions on how, if the time came to evacuate, where to go, keeping control of 3 or 4 airfields around Afghanistan, so everybody didn't have to make it to Kabul. And then being able, in a more orderly way, to get our friends, the people who have put their lives and their families at risk, to help us to help get them out of the country. We didn't do that, and we didn't do it even when President Biden extended the deadline from May 31st to August 31st. And so you ended up with the disaster that took place in Kabul and in Afghanistan a few weeks ago. And regardless of your position on whether or not to keep a force in Afghanistan, the fact is the outcome didn't have to be the way it was. It was a policy disaster. I will say this. One of the messages of the way that happened was to send the message to our adversaries and frankly to our friends that, first of all, there was a question of competence, but also that you can't rely on the United States, that at the end of the day, no matter what promises we make, we're gonna look out for ourselves and not for our allies and friends. And that's a serious message, unfortunately, that's been received among both our friends and our adversaries.
Well, for sure, there was in the Washington world an ambivalence to answer the question about a plan that then could be laid out to the various agencies and to our friends around the globe about what America's intent would be and where those things happen. Mr. Secretary, you and people who are like you, who are leaders of our country, perhaps Colin Powell, perhaps yourself, who are leading edge thinkers that move across lines, not just political lines, but lines around the world from respect for you. You have a strong desire, I know, because of your work with the Boy Scouts of America to begin and continue building the leadership of young people. Please take a minute with us and talk to us about how important it is just to not only have patriots who are willing to go serve our nation in the military, but also those who will bring excellence in academic credentialing and future technologies and doing those things to where we have these conversations with our young people who we want to challenge to continue not only to make America strong, but to protect us. Would you mind, as you finish your time here, and we want to thank you, and we will, how important that is that we build the next generation of professionalism to protect this country?
Pete, I think I can lay a claim to perhaps having as good insight into the attitudes and feelings of young people as anybody, given the fact that out of the 2 million men and women wearing uniform, most of them are pretty young. I was president of Texas A&M, national president of the Boy Scouts, now on the board of the NCAA. I think that this is an amazingly service-oriented and public service-oriented generation of young people. On every campus around the country, students are deeply engaged in service projects in their communities and even on a national level. The Boy Scouts in every community. The newspaper stories about the Boy Scouts in local newspapers are all about service projects, are all about things they're doing for the community. And when tragedy strikes in a community, some natural disaster, the Scouts and the young people and the National Guard and others are all out there. So the thing that worries me is the absence of the teaching of civics in our schools, so that these young people understand how important it is for them to be engaged in the political process and to not just have public service, but to understand that they need to be involved. They can't sit on the sidelines. As former First President Bush used to say, you got to get off the sidelines and into the game. And unfortunately, some of the examples that we see of political leaders in Washington and elsewhere discourages young people from wanting to get in public service. The polarization that we have and the hatred in our public life discourages them from wanting to get involved. So I think it's up to their elders, if you will, for those of us who are older, to say, you know, it doesn't have to be this way, and you can help change it. You can help bring civility back into our public life, and the kind of working together to get big things done in this country. You know, the Chinese theme right now is one of American decline, and they point to our polarization. They point to paralysis in Washington and so on. We need to change that narrative. We need to change it for the world, but we need to change it in terms of our own young people so that they will get engaged. And as adults will, and as they get into their late 20s and their 30s, engage in public life and in public service and not see it as a place to be avoided.
Mr. Secretary, the words that you give us are really not just advice. I think it's good common sense. We know when America is at its best, the world stands a better chance. And likewise, the reverse is true. When America is conflicted, when we're not together, it causes mistrust and probably bad things that could happen around the globe. Your service to this great nation throughout your years of service have been not only a hallmark of professionalism and expertise, sir, but of real admiration. I might be a few years younger than you, but my admiration for your tenacity is important. And I think one of the most important things that I've heard you say for years in Dallas, Texas, in about 1995, was that we have to call out things that we think are right and support them, and call out things that we think that are wrong and not be silent. And Mr. Secretary, today you have graciously given your time to America's Future series. And on behalf of all the people that are listening and watching, we give a thanks to you for your service to this great nation and wish you Godspeed, not only for the rest of the day as you move forward, but as we move into our future. And God bless you, sir.
Thanks, Pete. It's been a pleasure being with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. David?
Thanks to you both. That was just fantastic. Secretary Gates, we certainly appreciate you taking your time from your busy schedule. And our longtime friend, Congressman Pete Sessions. Pete, well done.
Scott, thank you very much. What a pleasure it was to be here. And as always, my friend, thank you for your service to the men and women of our military. I cannot wait until I see you next time. And it's my hope that both of you have an awesome day, and God bless both of you.
Thanks so much, Pete, and thanks for all you continue to do. We very much appreciate your time today.
Yes, sir.
Now, that was great, huh, David?
Yes.
Really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed that.
Yep.
And
And Pete has been a long-time supporter of
Absolutely.
the America's Future series. Known him for years. Sir, we
Yep.
salute you.
Yeah, for
You're a
sure,
Great patriot.
Pete. Great to see you.
Have a great day.
Yep.
Thanks so
Yep.
much. Well, I guess we've got time to take a break or something. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, we have
now,
about
or-
3 minutes.
Yeah,
And
okay,
then we're going to bring
okay.
JD back.
Okay.
And just a really quick, as I like to say in the military, bio break.
Okay.
Here we go.
All right.